So, in this somewhat rambling video, you will be learning about working around awkward bugs. And by the end of it, your tanks will no longer be jittering around. And I'm just going to talk you through the process that I went through in order to find this bug in between videos. It took me about 2 or 3 hours to get to the bottom of it. I still didn't quite get to the bottom of it, but we'll see the process and we'll see a workaround, and that'll be good enough for us to move on. So we've upgraded to 4.12. We have a commit in our repository. We actually probably ought to tag here, even though the commit says that we've upgraded to 4.12. I'm actually going to use the tagging system to add a tag to this specifically commit saying 4.12 like that. I think that's just going to make sense as well. So you can right-click the commit, tag, then it'll fill in the specific commit, and then 4.12. And then that'll just leave this tag here in the hierarchy as we proceed up. It'll remind me where I did my upgrade, a bit like this 4.11 upgrade there. You see, it's just pretty handy to just immediately see where you went to each version. Anyway, so we've upgraded to 4.12, and we have an issue. Now, this is not completely uncommon. The issue actually was there in 4.11, but it's considerably worse in 4.12. Look at this guy over here. He's got serious issues going on, bouncing around all over the place. Now, this purple outline I've turned on, by the way, is just here under Show and Collision. I think that's probably the only thing I've changed in between videos. So Show Collision will turn your collision outline on, but it doesn't give you a huge amount of clues as to what on earth is going on here. So the purpose of this video really is to just go through a process of trying to work out how on earth these tanks have ended up in this state and what it could be. So let's explore a few things. I have now worked out what the bug is. Obviously, I'm not going to show you all of the thought process because it was quite a lot of messing around. But I'll show you the sorts of things that I did to get here. So firstly, let's go look at the tank blueprint and remind ourselves how it's put together. Here we go in the viewport. Now we've got all these components to it, and we've got these tracks, and then the tracks themselves are made up of these static meshes which we can inspect. And the static meshes, if we turn the collision box here on the static mesh inspector, you can see there's actually two sets of collision on here. We have the outer simplified collision, and then we have this guy, which I can turn on and off under LOD0, enable collision. So I initially thought, well, maybe it's something to do with this. Maybe we don't want this complex, more complex collision mesh. So I turn that off, and you can also turn it off in the import settings. So it doesn't create this more complex collision mesh, because we actually only want this simplified one on the outside. So I did that, but unfortunately it doesn't change anything. But it has reduced the amount of collision data in the game a little bit. So once you're in the spirit of simplifying collision meshes, you may as well do the same thing for the turret. You'll notice that that has also imported with a more complex collision mesh there. So I think it's worth just stopping that happening on import, and then under LOD0 just turning that off as well and saving it. And again, at all these stages, when you're trying these things, it's worth just trying and seeing if it fixes things. Hasn't. As it happens, fixed it. So you could try the same for the barrel, but this would be getting tenuous. Now, I'm going to do it for the barrel. Interestingly, the problem is related to the barrel, strangely, even though you wouldn't expect it to be. It's very tempting here to go, well, it must be something to do with the tracks colliding with the ground. So you could, for example, in your tank blueprint, go to your two tracks and you could remove them even and see if that makes a difference. I don't see there's any harm in doing that, so let's remove the tracks and try playing. And then you unfortunately see it still doing the same thing, so I can use a Control-Z hopefully on the blueprint to put them back. So very odd, right? Now, what other clues have we got? Always look in your log. Is there anything in here? Well, I'm not seeing anything right now. We could try playing again and just leaving it running for a sec, because it's a really weird sporadic error. And still not solved. Okay, so it's starting to be a little strange. Now, what else could this possibly be? Well, you can look at things like the positioning of these sockets to see that perhaps if the colliders of the track are interacting with the colliders of the tank or something. I've tried that, tried moving all the sockets around, no good, doesn't make any difference. There is something else I really want you to note here, which is that we hid on the left and right tracks the collision, or no, we didn't on the left and right tracks, but on the turret, we hid the collision section. Do you remember in the C++ code? Let's go and have a look at it. Because one thing about just coming in here and fiddling with all the physics settings on the tank is that they may not all be there, because we chose on the tank turret.h to say hide categories collision. So I'm actually going to reverse that decision for a moment. So on your tank turret.h, remove the bit that says hide categories collision, or you can simply, if you want to keep the code, you can comment it and then just close your braces appropriately. And I think we did the same thing on the turret, the barrel rather. So close the brackets and just comment out the hide categories collision on the turret and the barrel. So what that's going to do for us is it's going to give us some more levers back again. When we're inspecting the turret here in the tank blueprint, at the moment we don't have collision, and because we disable collision, it also took physics subsection with it. And it may be that you can't solve the bug without a setting that's in one of those things. So it's a very useful tip to think, well, am I seeing everything? So now if we come back to the turret, you'll see actually we've got collision back on. All right. So what is going on? On the tank, what could this be to do with? It's almost certainly to do with collision, but what is it about the collision? I don't think there's anything on the tank itself, that is the top level actor. The tank static mesh root, is there anything on there that could possibly be causing the problem? Well, we need to be simulating physics, we need to have gravity. You should ask the question, do we want gravity enabled on the tracks? Well, probably not. So I'm going to go and turn gravity off on the tracks and try and see if that fixes things. Because we only want to simulate gravity on the root object, but that still hasn't helped, strangely. So you can carry on down the tank and say, well, what's this auto world setting? It's disabled at the top level body, but it's there on the left and the right tracks. Now, it turns out that this does have something to do with the bug. If we turn off auto world, which makes, as it says, all of the rigid bodies joined into a single rigid body of the parent, look what happens. Whoa, flying tank. So that's bad, obviously, but it's also good because we're getting a little bit closer. It's something to do with the way that the tank's colliders are interacting with themselves. So we want welding on for the tracks, and we want welding on for the turret, if there's an option there. And there actually probably isn't. And why? Well, there is. Sorry, there is. And also the barrel. So they all have auto welding on. There is no welding for the azimuth gimbal. You may, by the way, hypothesize that it's something to do with this camera gimbal, so you could delete it and test. Recompile the blueprint and play. Now I have an unresolved compiler error, and that's because things are relying on that camera gimbal, so I better put that back. and that's crashed the editor. So this is why it's really important to have yourself a stage here in your source control before you go messing around trying to work out what the solution is. So let's go back to that tank blueprint and see if we can continue to diagnose and work out what's going on. I can't really give you a challenge for this video, apart from stop the video now and work it out for yourself, but you know, that's a tricky one. So I'm going to check that we haven't lost anything. The left, the right track, the turret and the barrel should all have auto weld on them, and none of them should have enable gravity. You see that checkbox means that some are set and some aren't. So auto weld should be on, enable gravity should be off. That's definitely what we want, but unfortunately the tracks are still popping through the ground. How strange. Now, at one point, in fact, it's there in the logs. Look at this. I saw this pop up. If I can see, if I can get the logs working. I'm being wholly incompetent right now, or something's going on. Oh, come on. I'll just scroll up. There's an error here somewhere. Handled error. Local pose is valid. So it's talking about a pose not being valid in some physics engine body setup. What pose? Well, this isn't a humanoid character, right? It's a tank. But I think what's going on, I don't know, by the way, the exact cause of this bug, but I think what's going on is Unreal is somewhat processing this tank as if it's a humanoid character, and that's causing it problems. See, what I've noticed is this. If we, say, take the barrel away for a moment completely and compile, you'll notice the problem goes away. We're taking the barrel away, and the problem goes away. How strange, right? So let's put the barrel back. Control Z if it'll let me. Will it? Nope, so I'm going to have to manually add the barrel back. Tank barrel, there it is, pop it in, and there's no harm in refreshing these things anyway to see if there's perhaps something wrong with the instance of the tank barrel. So let's pop it back onto the socket like that, reset its transform, we should be good to go, compile and play. So now I've actually rebuilt the barrel to see if that solves the problem, and actually, for the moment it has, look. The barrel is fixed. The problem is fixed after having rebuilt the barrel. So there was something wrong with the barrel, but let's look deeper. If you go to your event graph now, remember where we set the barrel reference? It's no longer there. Look, when we play the game, the barrel won't move, because when we deleted that barrel, we lost this reference. Okay, no problem. So let's just let's just rename this thing barrel. I think that's how we had before. And let's just put the reference back. Ready? So that the set barrel reference code knows about the barrel, play the game. Oh, darn, the problem's back. How strange is that? So, one solution to this, well, is not possible, right? It's not possible to make the solution, well, let's not set the barrel reference. We've got to set the barrel reference. So, what can we do? Well, it turns out that if you were to turn the collider off on the turret, the collision off on the turret, that would also solve it. Now, one way you could do that is you could come into the turret here, and you could set the collision presets for the turret to no collision, compile and play. Let's see what that does. That makes it go really funny. Let's try doing the same on the barrel now. So it's kind of shooting in the dark to just try and find a solution that works for the moment. No collision on the barrel. Does that work? Actually, that does. So if there's no collision on the barrel or the turret, then we are good to go. We don't have the problem anymore. So look, I really don't know precisely what's going on here. In this instance, you would ask yourself, do I want to try living with it for a bit? Because I would report this bug to Unreal. It's not really a bug yet. We don't know that it's a bug, but we know that we're not sure why this is happening, right? Why is it something to do with this hierarchy and the self-interaction of colliders? Why is it causing this problem? So you'd report it to Unreal. You'd say, well, actually, I can still play the game, even if my projectiles can't hit the turret and the barrel for the moment. You would note that it got worse from 4.11 to 4.12. Now, we don't know whether that means it's going to get better or worse in a future version of 4.12. It may be that the way we're using the engine is, well, it's staying the same, but that Unreal's idea of how to do these things is diverging from us, or it might be that this will get better. So what I'm going to suggest is that we loop back to this later if it causes a gameplay problem. And in the meanwhile, that we ask Unreal what is going on. Can you tell us why this is having this problem? All right. So there's two ways of solving it. One is to go to the turret and the barrel and turn on no collision. If you don't want to do that, you can leave it back at block all dynamic where the problem will occur. And you can go to the turret mesh, and then you can remove the collision volume like that. And if you do that on the turret mesh, it will also solve the problem. Okay, so why is the tank jumping? Oh, it's still doing it actually. So that's not a reliable way of doing it. You're going to want to remove the collision mesh also on the barrel, or turn off collisions. I think those two things are equivalent. So let's just try it the other way. Remove collision mesh on the barrel, play the game, and just see if it's reliable now. I'm looking for it to not jump at all. So while I wait to see if any of those tanks jump, and they ominously aim at me, I was saying that why does the tank jump when we have this problem? Well, frankly, I don't know, but what's going on is something like we are messing up the collision detection on the tank itself because of the way that these objects that are in a hierarchy are interacting with one another, possibly because Unreal is making some assumptions about the rigging, i.e. the order in which these things are parented, which would normally be like spine and then, shoulder and arms and stuff like that, being humanoid, and it's not a humanoid. So that's my best guess. We'll ask Unreal in the meanwhile, and then we can crack on, because we actually had this problem in our prototype, and some of you may have spotted it in the video, the tank jumping off bits of the terrain when it shouldn't have done. I think this was the same thing. It wasn't actually hitting something on the terrain, but it was just having a weird self-collision glitch, and it's like putting an impulse through the tank and knocking it in the air. But removing the collision meshes or turning off collision, which is the same thing really for the barrel and the turret, solve the problem. Now we can focus on the tank base and on getting that doing what we want. So in the next video, we'll pick up projectiles where we left off. And sorry about the diversion to 4.12, but it was required. You've got more disk space, the latest version of Unreal, and this fundamental bug is worked around but not resolved.